Hello there, and thanks for choosing this content. Just a quick disclaimer to say that all views in this video are personal and belong entirely and only to the person saying them. They do not reflect the views, stance, or policy of any other person, organization, employer, or entity. And with that being said, let's go to the video. Hello and welcome to the Cloud Therapist channel. I'm Richard Simon. You may have caught me saying recently that a number of videos that I've been doing, a number of talks I've been doing have been kind of around this sort of dead tech series. It's kind of a loosely coupled series that I've inadvertently seemed to have been creating on the channel over the last few months. So I thought it would be really nice to kind of round off all of those conversations by having a panel discussion. So I'm calling this one the Beyond the Dead Tech series. So that's the panel discussion for today. If you haven't checked out some of the other videos that I've done, please do check those out. They're all on the Cloud Therapist channel. I think I started with the Is the OS Dead? And then we moved on to Is DevOps Dead? Is OpenStack Dead? Is the hypervisor and virtual machines dead? And then a DevOps section as well, which I did quite recently. So all of those should be on the channel. Do check them out if you have a chance. I'll drop links in the description of the video anyway. That's as far as that's it on the list as far as I can remember. But yeah, it'll be just interesting. I thought we can have like a little panel discussion. So I'll probably just get my guests to do an intro first, and then we'll move on to kind of having a round off of all these particular topics. So David, would you mind starting first, please?
No problems. Thanks very much for inviting me on, Simon. I'm David Terra. I'm the CEO of a not-for-profit trade body called the Cloud Industry Forum, which has just been taken over by something called Tech Industry Forum. And it's a kind of a management buyout from the Federation Against Software Theft. I've been in the tech space for an awful long time. I'm not going to admit how long, but when we talk about mainframes and mid-range, I go back to that kind of thing. Looking forward to sharing some thoughts.
Fantastic. And Jay, please.
Yeah, so I've been in the tech industry for a while. I actually count my start at 8 years old on my Spectrum when I first started coding. I didn't get paid for that, obviously, but yes. But yeah, worked at large enterprises. So, you know, a lot of the technologies we're going to talk about and you've talked about in your previous series, that resonates with me in my time at Citigroup and running cloud platforms, Maersk, Thales in the defense industry. You know, I've come across all of these old technologies. I've got the war wounds, having worked in that space. At the moment, I am now, I run JP Global, which is a consulting and fractional CTO services. And we're very focused on transformation. So transforming from these old technologies, the strategy side and the execution side into what comes in the future or what there is at the moment, and then preparing your businesses for the future. So that's JP Global, which is most of what I take using my time for at the moment.
Okay, fantastic. Well, gentlemen, welcome to the Cloud Therapist channel. So thank you very much for agreeing to do this. So yeah, let's get cracking. So Jay, I know that you were quite enthusiastic when we kind of talked about this, and you dropped me a list of stuff that you wanted to talk about in terms of dead tech series. So we'll try and cover as much of those as we can, and we'll drop the rest in the description of the video if we can't get around to it. But certainly, thank you for contributing to that list. And David, obviously, we'll kind of welcome your sort of wisdom too when it comes to kind of your vast experience and so on, harking back to when you could actually touch mainframes and they were physical there and you could see them and so on. Well, I'm sure they're still there in data centers, but they're it's kind of been overtaken by clouds and things like that. But anyway, so Jay, I know you kind of issued to mention a few of those things on your list. I appreciate you contributing. Let's start with sort of the hardware side a little bit. Jay, you mentioned kind of mainframes as well and mid-range sort of machines in your in your list. Are we kind of really now fully software defined in a fully software defined world? What's your take on that?
Unfortunately, we're not, but we should be, right? The efficiencies of software defined in terms of what it gives you, agility, faster configuration, resilience. For me, it's a no-brainer. I've had so many issues. If I just take even at City, the work was easy until we got to, okay, you now need to change some configuration on a network switch to open up some ports, and that's months of time because it's not software defined when it should just be a 5-minute config change in the software to push that and then push that out. So, why does it take weeks and months? And there's some governance and processes around it and so on. So the answer is I don't understand why everything isn't software defined. The hardware manufacturers, if we talk about network switches from Cisco or the storage devices, it's been that transition. So I really don't understand why network engineers and storage specialists haven't really embraced the software defined world, because it makes their job so much easier. The efficiencies, everything just speaks for itself.
Yeah, indeed. And I do sympathize with you. I've been there as well as a field engineer in the past when I've asked for changes and stuff like that. Now to fill in forms and so on. It's taken days, if not weeks. So you're quite right about that. David, do we still care about the kind of the badge at the front of the server machine these days?
Well, I guess on one level we shouldn't, because it's, in general, we're talking about cloud-based services and it's being delivered to us. And why do we care, where the data center is and what hardware is involved and all the rest of it. So we shouldn't really care. But on another level, we do. I mean, if I can just quickly say that I came into this industry literally finished my physics degree last exam on a Friday and joined IBM on the following Monday, straight into the world of work.
Just in time.
So I was there when the IBM personal computer was announced in 1981. So I'm admitting how long ago it was. But one of the things that interests me about the way technology is developed is that back then we had the mainframe and then the mini computer and then the personal computer, and then we started talking about the internet. We had kind of like one innovation happening every 5 or 8 years, and some new brands came into being and other brands disappeared, each kind of transition. Then we get to 2007. Which I'd argue is the start of the fourth industrial revolution. And then suddenly we got cloud and social and mobile happening simultaneously. And from that point on, we've got innovations happening at the same time, right to now. And obviously now we're in an era where it's changing again. I'd suggest it's going to be very different from this point on, with lots of change. So I'd also argue that actually, who you buy with is important, and it's all about the great thing about all of this complexity is that we've actually ended up with loads more choices as I've gone through my career. The available options of how I can do things and the choices I've got have just increased, and that's got to be good for people.
Yeah. I mean, I think we've kind of got to the open compute sort of stage now, where even the hardware is kind of sort of open sourced, if you like, and so on. If you go to any of these sort of open source conferences, you'll kind of see the sort of the open compute architecture there, and somebody or another is demonstrating that. So recently we've kind of seen that Intel and AMD have kind of gotten into a lot more trouble in terms of what they're sort of trying to achieve. Their numbers not as fantastic as they've been before. Intel's had sort of injections from the US government to bring back some of their fabs back into the US, and that's all because of the Taiwan situation, China situation, and so on. But also because of, I think, a little bit of, well, actually, a large amount of their strategy as well, kind of just doing more of the same, and having really, or sort of not having a sort of a vision, being kind of lacking a vision in terms of their future. So you've seen the likes of ARM, for example, come in, with low-powered systems, low-powered processor designs, and so on, rather, and then other vendors taking that up, even to the point where I read the rumor recently that Qualcomm was actually looking to acquire Intel. So Jay, what's kind of your take? Do you agree with that? And kind of where do we see sort of the future with Intel and AMD?
Yeah, I do agree with it, and could see this coming. So why the big behemoths of Intel and AMD didn't see that coming is maybe a lack of foresight or a bit reactionary. But in summary, I think it's obvious that they underestimated the rise of low power devices, mobile devices. They were still sticking to their guns that everybody's still going to use a laptop and even in the server architecture, right? We're seeing NVIDIA and the rise of the GPUs or the tensor processing units and TPUs and things eat away in that market share now as well. So there's a lesson to be learned, and it'll be interesting to see if Intel and AMD, or Intel specifically in that space, have learned. And it looks like they haven't, because they're losing that market share as well. So yeah, there was a big underestimation on their part in terms of how ubiquitous mobile phones and all these low power devices. And their only saving grace, I would say, is that IoT didn't become the revolution that we were predicting sort of 5 years ago, because then they would definitely not be part of that world, because IoT would have taken over, and that's become a bit of a trickle. It's slowed down a little bit in terms of market share and so on, but it's something that those companies should pay attention to, because IoT is inevitable, and massively distributed low power compute, and how we do that. So yeah, that was their saving grace. Let's see if they've learned their lessons. Everything that I'm seeing out of GPUs and as I said, NVIDIA, doesn't inspire confidence that they have learned their lessons there.
Yeah, I know that they made some announcements recently around GPUs, but I think it's kind of too little, too late for that, really.
It's reactionary rather than being proactive. And these are traditionally very innovative companies that when they were starting, were really pioneering. I remember the old x86 architecture and the Pentiums and so on. And I think that now you just look at the naming structures, right? It's just iterative. i5s, i3s, i7s, and actually from a software defined world, they're actually giving you the same chips, but software limiting the capabilities on there, which isn't quite innovation, right?
No. I don't know what generation we are on. There's now 12th generation, I think, or something like that, on those processors. So I don't know. So David, recently we saw in the summer the announcement and release of ARM-based notebooks or laptops from Microsoft, actually running Windows. Again, likes of Qualcomm and all the vendors were sort of in there supporting that. This was kind of unheard of, only 12 months ago, right? When the first, I think, rumors started. But before that, this was kind of unheard of. This is the first time when Microsoft and Windows is actually detaching itself from that sort of x86 sort of architecture properly. They did do it with RT before, but I think that was it wasn't it didn't have this kind of movement in it. What's your take on that?
Well, I think it's another ingredient in terms of Intel's current position, and obviously, the PC business is a huge part of what they do, and I'd say that there are kind of like three things. One of which Joe's already said though, but the first is I think that the American 2022 sanctions on chips into China has actually had a detrimental effect on all of the American chip manufacturers. And you've got that factor happening at the same time as the rise in AI means we're all thinking about different types of chips and GPUs for actually addressing those issues. And Intel's obviously been behind the curve. Yeah. And it's fascinating that the idea of Qualcomm coming along to acquire Intel. I mean, that's just mind blowing 5 years ago or more. But it's because Intel are definitely not got into the AI game as quick as they should. They've got the pressures on the PC business. They've got some, negative cash flow. They've got other issues and things. It's obvious that they're a good-looking kind of acquisition target, either for the likes of Qualcomm or for a private equity firm, perhaps.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, for those of us who've lived with Intel over decades, it's kind of stunning, but also not surprising, because when new technology hits, just like I was saying earlier, there are some brands that survive the new stuff, and new brands that we hadn't even thought about come in. But I actually think that this whole, I don't know enough about the whole of the chip, the kind of chip world, but I think those sanctions were negative, and it's probably actually increased the chances of Chinese chip manufacturers developing innovative stuff and doing things which wouldn't happen had those sanctions not been in place.
Yeah, I think it's. I mean, definitely. I've covered this before, because there's been other news items that have come up over the last sort of at least 12 months or so. But I think in the Cloud State of Play, sort of the monthly video that I do, is kind of come up. I think on that we have sort of touched on, Intel and AMD, and certainly the sort of the ARM movement around AI and so on. But even the just kind of moving on just quickly to sort of the more traditional hardware vendors, the Dells, HPEs, IBM, Lenovo, and so on. They also seem to be, needing to reinvent themselves every few years to kind of, remain sort of relevant and competitive, I guess. So yeah, I don't. I mean, there's been kind of lots of changes they've done over the years. Everything from sort of hyper-converged. We started with kind of virtualization, went on to hyper-converged infrastructure. More recently, it's been then it was kind of OpenStack and stuff like that. But then more recently, it's been kind of around AI. Positioning themselves around AI. Every Dell video, every Dell webinar that I watch now has got AI in it. And it was like 6 months ago, it was non-existent. It was still selling servers and storage and so on. So yeah, so I think that's all happening there. Have you guys heard of the documentary called Clouded at all?
Yes, Nigel Tremaine-Pitter's outfit.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, Jay, do you know about that documentary?
No, I haven't come across that yet.
Okay, all right. I mean, it's on YouTube, so even for our dear
Daniel
audience, you guys
Tremaine-Pitter,
can.
by the way. No, sorry, I've got his name wrong.
Oh, okay. No, not to worry. I'm sure he's not watching this. So yeah, so Clouded is kind of on there, and it was, it's on YouTube, like I said, so everybody can check it out. I think it was sponsored by, at least the first one was sponsored by VMware and HPE.
Right.
So it's kind of for me, I mean, I did a review of it actually on the Cloud Therapist channel as well. So I'll again drop the link in the description on that. I did that with a couple of friends as well. And for me, it came across as a tour de force of all the misconceptions about cloud computing. And the people that were being interviewed were kind of, from Dell, HPE, and VMware and HPE and so on. And it was just kind of very, antiquated sort of views of what cloud computing is. And, I was kind of watching and going, did we answer these questions 10 years ago? Sort of thing. So anyway, but yeah, it was kind of focused a lot more on sort of public cloud. I think with the exception of one guy from Microsoft who seemed to be a little bit bewildered as to why he was on the documentary, and I have to say it was kind of fish out of water. It didn't make any sense for him to be there. But yeah, like I said, I'll drop a link in the description of the video.
Just talk about repatriation, don't they?
Well, so I think they kind of touched on that, but there is a Clouded 2 documentary, and that touches a lot more on sort of cloud costs and repatriation and so on. I haven't done a review of that yet, but a review is coming. So that will be on the channel at some point. That's definitely in my crosshairs. Okay, so that was kind of a quick roundup on the sort of the hardware side. So let's kind of move up the stack.
Can I just chip in one?
Oh yes, of course.
One thing, just as a kind of like a general thing about the
market. Yeah.
Let me see. Where is it?
It has a book. Wow.
There's a book.
Okay.
The 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing.
Laws of Marketing. Okay.
So I'm kind of old school, and I think there are some things in business that never change.
Yeah.
And one of the laws in here is the law of category. And in any given category, whether it's hardware or cloud or whatever,
Yeah.
there are usually one or two or three big players, and then the rest.
Yes. Yeah.
And obviously the thing to do is to be the first in the category.
Yeah.
You might not necessarily the first into it, but the one that leads it. And if you're number 3 or number 4, what you need to do is actually create a new category that you're then going to be in the lead of.
Leader of, yeah.
I think, to a certain extent, that's what's going on with us at the moment, where the categories are splitting and proliferating, and we're getting lots of choice, which is good, but an awful lot of complexity comes with it.
Yes, I agree. And I mean, I think in that space, even the virtualization space with VMware, and we've now seen where VMware's gone. We'll touch on that soon.
Yeah.
But even for the hardware vendors, we've seen that actually other players have come in and stolen their lunch. So things like hyper-converged infrastructure has come in, and they're all become OEMs of those platforms, instead of actually being the leaders or the inventors of those things. Okay, so let's move on to the next, because we've got quite a lot to go through. So moving up the stack, as we said, we kind of hit the operating system. So for me, with the advent of things like orchestration platforms like Kubernetes and Swarm, Docker Swarm before that, and Mesos, it's an open source solution, sort of computing in general, cloud computing, kind of in their sort of purest cloud native form. If you're kind of looking at provisioning workloads and into production in that sort of cloud native environment, this has really essentially done away with what I would call this sort of the full fat operating system. So it's things like Windows Server, Red Hat Enterprise Linux, SUSE Enterprise Linux or SUSE Linux, whatever. Those things are really in that space. You don't really need them. You don't even need them to run Kubernetes anymore. I mean, I've worked for vendors like Mirantis and SUSE in the past and so on, and we weren't even using the full fat operating systems anymore, because the actual node within that Kubernetes cluster is just not essential. Even the node can go away and or fail or crash or whatever, and you can still recover your services elsewhere. So it's not kind of essential. So Jay, do you really need, do we really still need sort of these full fat operating systems? What's your view on
that? No, is the simple answer, right? Especially on the server side, right?
Yeah.
There's an argument to be made on the client side, but we're seeing that change as well as people, Chrome OS, Android, are they counted as full fat OSs? Probably not. And we're starting to see a slimming down version on there. But from an enterprise perspective, we've seen this for a while. That even in my personal life and in my professional life, you go into Windows and you shut down all the things that you don't want, or you shut down remote desktop because it's not secure and so on. So you're turning off all these services. Anyway, same with Linux. You're going in doing task killer on a bunch of things that you don't need and locking that out. So we've been doing this on the server side for decades, right? It's just standard practice when you get the new servers. So not having to do that is easier. And obviously, as you mentioned, with the now abstractions of containerization, and you get into hyper optimized, what is your application doing? And just having those services available from your OS, which is essentially just the talking to the hardware.
Yeah.
As you said, do you need the full fat OS? No, most organizations are turning off large parts of it anyway. And leaner and meaner is the way to go now, right? That's what we've seen with orchestration, container orchestration, containerization. It's give me something lean that does its job and does it very, very well, and then we can scale out from there. So if you're using full fat OSs, and this is where we had this conversation when virtualization came in, right? When VMware was still relevant, and how do we start bringing in? Do we need some of the hardware protocols that we had? Well, no, we're not using the networking, or if we are, we turn that on, and we're turning off some of the graphics displays, because nobody's actually interactively logging into the machine anymore to interact with it. So we did this with the virtualization piece, and now as we move up the stack into cloud, we're doing that anyway.
Yeah, yeah, indeed. So David, you've kind of, you speak to a lot of people and kind of interviews quite a lot. What's kind of is this idea sort of coming across in your conversations as well? Have you sort of encountered that type of discussion before?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's not something that I delve into too much in the our cloud industry forum shows, but yeah, simplicity is better. The further away from the complexities of the operating system, the better. And so the idea. I mean, I'm on a Mac because I don't want to actually grapple with Windows, and my wife. Is a bit of a technophobe and has to be dealing with the Windows operating system day in, day out, and she hates it, and her dyslexia probably doesn't help. So I'm very much a business applications person. I want to get away from all that complexity and just do the business process that I'm interested in doing to do the job to make the sale or do whatever it is that I need to do. So yeah, I want to the fact that we're moving in that direction where things are getting simpler is good, but on the other hand, there's an awful lot of choice and an awful lot of complexity that we're introducing into what we do, which we'll talk about in a bit, I'm sure.
Yeah, indeed.
I just want to add something on there as well, because we are losing something by abstracting away too much from the complexity. So with my children, I'm trying to get them to appreciate, because nowadays you don't have access into the CPU or the storage and so on. Those days of loading DOS in upper memory blocks to optimize, you'll get an extra megabyte for your gamings and all of that stuff is not there, and you can't even open up some of these devices or anything like that. And we're losing the understanding of what's actually going on under the hood with that abstraction. So there's a balance there, as much as I agree that we don't want to get into what's actually happening under the hood of operating systems. There was a value in knowing that these processes are running, right? Who knows today what processes are running in the background, and can you actually go in and have a look and turn some of these things off? Yeah. So I do encourage the practitioners, and I do this with my kids to try and get them to understand what's actually happening under the hood, even though they shouldn't care about it. You should know.
Yeah. I have a 10-year-old, so I explained to him how a screen works, the refresh of the screen and the interaction with the graphics cards and stuff like that. It's kind of, you can see his eyes sort of lights up when I was doing that. I would recommend Raspberry Pis if your kids are not playing with Raspberry Pis yet. That's definitely the way to go. That's a great way to learn about computing and programming. But just going back to the point, so Kubernetes can run in bare metal, right? It can run just directly on bare metal. We don't need a hypervisor. We don't need OpenStack. We don't need anything else really. We can just run it in sort of bare metal, or if we really want to kind of put it in our own version of it into the public cloud, we can run it on sort of their instances, if you like, as well. So again, I think that's if we can run it on bare metal and it is a orchestrator, and then our apps are running in Docker containers, they're containerized. All of those don't really need an operating system. None of those. I mean, they just need like a core Linux or a Linux kernels type, which all the distributions run on these days anyway. And that's all you need really. So that sort of full fat operating system is just no longer required. I remember that with Red Hat, I think they acquired somebody called CoreOS a while back, and that kind of I think became part of that sort of movement. But then I'm not sure if they run OpenShift on Red Hat Enterprise Linux these days. I don't know, but point being is that all the stuff you can, if you really want to kind of run it in your own data center on your own systems, you can run it in bare metal. You don't really need anything in between, no hypervisors, no virtualization, and so on. Did you know that 80% of you watching right now aren't subscribed yet to this channel? Come on, guys, we can do better, surely. So please hit subscribe and the notification bell. It costs nothing, but it really helps me to keep making more videos for you. All right, back to the therapy session. Okay, so moving on to nicely onto the hypervisors and virtual machines. That's our next topic. So again, with the I kind of separated the orchestration from the containerization deliberately because we kind of wanted to focus on it a little bit more here. But again, with the advent of of containers, that sort of that traditional hypervisor and virtual machine space is not really, is kind of going away, right? Because we've kind of moved on to the next unit of computing, which is a container, right? So containers are kind of set to replace virtual machines. So they're definitely, dead, if not sort of dying out. And then the other issue that we've seen is, the likes of VMware, the sort of the undisputed king of, virtualization and virtual machines, less than a year ago, got acquired by Broadcom. So I've been following again that particular story ever since this announcement back in late 2022, and then kind of its completion late last year, and some of the stunts that that Broadcom pulled on the partners and the licensing or subscription model for it as well. So this is kind of really, again, VMware, just like Intel and AMD, is kind of stuck to their guns, not really innovated. They put in a whole lot of stuff. I remember when the whole hyper-converged infrastructure thing took off, they brought out the software-defined data center, the SDDC, and then put all these kind of other tools around it like vRealize and whatever else and so on. But really, at the end of the day, it was still vSphere, and there wasn't anything really new that you were essentially doing there. Just kind of just adding a lot more fluff around sort of the core of that. So VMware not needed in public cloud, David? Is that a fair point? I know that they've kind of done things like VMC and so on, in the last sort of few years, but not really something that we require.
I think you're right, although I'm not expert enough in it to know really what the options are. But yeah, I agree with what you're saying.
Okay, and Jay, I mean, like I said, I know that they tried with VMC, they tried with Tanzu as well. I was actually working for the startup company that they acquired, and then eventually that became the Tanzu solutions. That was Heptio, which was a Seattle startup that I joined back in 2018. So who's running these, Jay?
I'll be depends how polite I'm going to be, but essentially,
as long as it doesn't involve any swear words, you can be as impolite as you like.
This is what happens when you let salespeople make technology choices, right? Because I've had loads of conversations
That's a great answer, yeah.
Around Tanzu. And I get where it comes from, right? So, the conversations, and it's not just at one company. I've had this at a couple of places. And it's, well, my team are platform engineering teams. We're a cloud native, all of that good stuff. And it's like, yeah, but we've got this VMware side of things, and we want to run hybrid. Can we run Tanzu and so on? And I know where that's coming from. That's VMware trying to catch up with the rest of the cloud native world and saying, yeah, we can do containerization as well. And you've already got a contract with us, and you're spending X millions with us anyway on all this hypervisors and VDI infrastructure and so on. So we've got the shiny new thing called Tanzu, and that's your containerization. And the reality is, it's not, right? We're already way beyond that in a lot of these organizations. So yeah, it's more of a sales thing, and as you said, putting a lot of fluff around it when actually there's better technologies that you should be focusing on.
So yeah, go ahead, David.
And just to say, I don't take it as a slight, because I see myself as a salesperson more than anything else, Jay. But I totally agree with what you're saying, because it sounds like those choices are being made on technology topics, and they shouldn't be. It should be about what's the business outcome we're trying to do with that piece of our solution, and what's the best technology to support that thing that we're trying to do. And so making the choice on this kind of virtual machine software rather than that kind of virtual machine software is not the way of thinking about it, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think it's nice to have these options, and certainly Tanzu is a knee-jerk reaction from VMware, because the whole sort of Kubernetes and container space was taking off at that point, that 2017, 2018 sort of period. And if you actually, I have said this before on another video, but if you actually look at, if you search for VMware acquisitions 2017 to 2020 or to 2021, you'll see how many that are actually acquired in this whole space. Now, I can maybe remember a few of them. Certainly Heptio was one because I was involved in that, but Bitnami and various other ones were all sort of part of that. Carbon Black, I think, was another one, and so on. And you kind of think, okay, you're buying all of these, and what are you doing with them? How are these going to fit in with your sort of strategy and portfolio and things like that? But anyway, and we also had things like KVM and Zen, from the open source side. But I mean, I don't think those really sort of got anywhere anyway. I mean, I remember again working at IBM and maybe brushing along a couple of customers that were kind of doing KVM at the time, and that was hairy stuff. It was, you'd be very brave to be kind of running that on CentOS or or something like that at that point. And again, we've had open source sort of hypervisor like Proxmox. Again, that's a kind of a bit of an alternative. That's actually kind of seems to have made a slight comeback recently because of the whole Broadcom, VMware by Broadcom sort of situations. Some people kind of looked at that. I was at the Open Source Summit recently in Vienna, and they had a stand there in the showcase area. So they were sort of talking away quite a lot with lots of customers. But the other kind of real alternative that was sort of seen a few years ago, maybe 2015, 2016, certainly when I attended one of its conferences, was OpenStack. And so OpenStack was kind of touted. It was, I think, by Rackspace and NASA, born out of some necessity that Rackspace needed to kind of create a cloud, a private cloud for NASA, I believe. But this was kind of the main thing that people wanted to really offer as an alternative to VMware. Sort of around that time, and one of the areas that is focused on has been things like the telco space with stuff like network function virtualization or NFV. So that was kind of one of the mainstays that it had. And certainly when I was at Mirantis, that was most of our customers were kind of in that sort of telco space. But again, a lot of that has moved to the public cloud. A couple of years ago, I think AWS announced NFV functions for AWS. Again, that kind of thing has sort of moved away. And then more recently, around around OpenStack, has been the likes of Red Hat and Canonical, who had been kind of staunch supporters, big supporters of it. I mean, even SUSE had it to a degree, but those were kind of the main serious contenders, really. Have also announced that they're going to run it on top of Kubernetes. You're going to run all of those OpenStack services on top of Kubernetes. And I explained that to me, Jay. That doesn't make any sense to me. What's your take on that?
Yeah, it's a really I've come across this kind of stuff as well, and what it speaks to me is people who don't really understand the IaaS and the PaaS and the SaaS world and how these things interact. So essentially, I mean, what you've just said is, well, we've got a PaaS service, and then we're gonna build a whole bunch of IaaS stuff on top of it, when it's actually the other way around. And I came across this successfully before we had PaaS at Thales, when we actually needed OpenStack and we were trying to build, as you said, all these big network switches. We were trying to run these massive simulators. And it's got storage in there, it's got network, it's got different operating systems and all of these things, and bring it all together. And OpenStack was good, but it's extremely complex, right? You needed an engineering degree just for that, just like to get your head around this. And I'm sure under the hood, our cloud providers who are running all this hardware and so on, that's their job to run the IaaS. If you actually still want to run your own infrastructure as a service, then fine, go ahead and dabble with OpenStack, and there's a value for it. But if you're already in the cloud and you want to start running IaaS on top of it, and City were doing this as well, because they just can't get out of their IaaS mindset. And yeah, it becomes a mess. because what you should be doing is looking at your IaaS, either build using things that like OpenShift and so on to build on top of, because it's so much easier. The levels of abstraction are there to let you do this. You don't have to get into the nitty-gritty details that OpenStack gives you, or unless you really need to, but there's very few use cases for that. And then just build the PaaS services on top of that. And actually, if you we're at the stage now where we don't even care about the PaaS services now. It's everything's all SaaS services on top of that. You know, once we get to platform engineering and the internal developer portals, do you even care which cloud platform things are running or which cloud services you're running? You just want to do your job. You want to develop your application or your business service, or when we started, we're talking about software defined. You just want to do something, and there's a very easy interface to do that. So why do you need to get into the IaaS side of things all the way down at that level? So that's my view. Anybody who's still doing IaaS, you better have a really good reason for doing it.
Exactly. And I think, I mean, OpenStack specifically, for me, just and again, I had sort of first-hand experience with it at Mirantis, and it was just extremely complicated, difficult to update. That was one of the major things about it, especially if you're actually managing if you're the engineering team, or offering it as a managed service or something.
Yeah, containerization hadn't matured at that point. And to be honest, I've not played with it in its latest iteration, so maybe it has, and I'd be surprised if it hasn't. But in sort of the late 2010, around about there, containerization hadn't really matured to the point that you could run OpenStack without all the headaches and the war wounds that we've got having doing that.
Yeah. So David, would you sort of agree that it's kind of got killed off by sort of the Kubernetes and the Docker, the container and orchestration sort of movement?
Yeah, absolutely. And if I can just kind of use an example of back in the day, I was part of a British business application accounting software company called Coda, CODA. That was actually at one point owned by Barn, the Dutch software company. Anyone remember them? But I can remember that the development team had to back in this time frame, because we're talking about in the 90s, we had to support 26 different platform combinations of all the different hardware and operating system and business application software combinations, and it meant that 99% of my development budget was spent on just keeping up to date with those 26 different platform sets of upgrades and the like. And I had hardly any left to actually develop new stuff. It was ridiculous. And the fact that we're actually way away from that, and we're now into this world where I can choose which cloud provider and keep it as simple as possible. It's brilliant that we're now getting to that stage.
Yeah. I mean, I think the moving OpenStack to kind of be emulated or to run as services on top of Kubernetes is really kind of those vendors preparing to discontinue it. I actually had this conversation with a Red Hat architect who shall remain nameless, but he was kind of saying no, it's just kind of makes it easier for things to run, and you can run all your OpenStack stuff on top of Kubernetes. Like, how many layers is that of sort of IaaS, as you said, before we actually get to running a freaking application on there? It's like, no, you and Canonical are doing this because you're going to continue with the next 18 months, as the others have pulled out. The likes of SUSE and so on, I believe, have pulled out of their distributions of OpenStack. And I think, I mean, for me, certainly that sort of, I was kind of in the thick of it because I was with SUSE at the time when sort of Kubernetes came in and Docker came in, that sort of 2016, 17 period. And then you had, Kubernetes on top of that sort of taking off, around the 2017, 2018 kind of really took off at that point. And this was supposed to be the kind of the height of really OpenStack, what OpenStack was doing. But I think by then, like a lot of these projects that I've seen, they get kind of too self-indulgent. And when you start, the worst thing about it, and this is a pet hate for me, is when you start actually naming your project. So every release, that you have for your project. They actually gave it a name. So like 1.21 was called, something, 1.22 was called something else. And I was like, oh, please stop doing that. It's just like a version number, for goodness sake. So yeah, I think it's kind of just got a little bit too arrogant and, it's kind of full of itself, really. The Kubernetes thing really sort of definitely killed it off. Okay, so obviously there's other hypervisors that we could talk about, things like hyperconverged infrastructure from the likes of Nutanix. This, again, mostly based on open source software, but I don't know if they actually do any contribution to open source. But, you can't have, as we said, you're quite right, Jay, we can't have too many abstraction layers. We have to be kind of, as close to the bare metal as we can. And certainly in cloud, that's probably even more, I think, more essential as well. Okay, so next topic is the DevOps space. So we're kind of moving up the stack a little bit more, and kind of trying to get to the top of that with these sort of software layers. So yeah, so probably, I don't know, maybe the biggest tragedy of them all, this one, DevOps. Jay, I know you described it, DevOps was DOA. So what was your view on that? What were you thinking when you said that?
This is a particular one for me. Just jumping back in time when before DevOps and why that actually came about, and development was doing some stuff and they were creating lots of change and software was eating the world and agile practices were coming in to bring some kind of flexibility and control into this. We obviously had version controls and ways of working, but a bit more sort of modernization on the development side of the world. And operations was very stable and static and so on. And these worlds were meeting, and it was turning into chaos. And DevOps, when it was born, was a philosophy. And what I saw really quickly, almost instantly, it became, rather than a merging of taking the best of development practices, things like version control, testing, and all of that sort of software excellence, and applying it to the operations side of the world, and then taking the best of the operations side of the world in terms of reliability and availability, and then bringing that to the development side of the world, it created this hybrid child in between called DevOps, and it became about the tools and people who are running Jenkins servers and CI/CD and doing release management and so on became these DevOps engineers. And it was like, no, that's not what this was supposed to be.
Yeah.
And then because DevOps is not prescriptive enough, like Agile, like if you do apply the Scrum framework, it's quite prescriptive. But DevOps wasn't prescriptive. So then you end up in this chaotic mess. And this is where things like reliability engineering came in, because what you need something prescriptive to bridge this gap. And so that's what I mean by it was dead on arrival. The moment it came, people just created this middle gap rather than what it was actually supposed to be, which is get devs to do ops stuff and ops to do dev stuff and bring the two much closer together. We actually did the opposite and brought them even further apart by creating this big wedge in the middle called the DevOps team. And yeah, having lived through that and platform engineering, I was doing DevOps before DevOps was a thing. So people would ask me, "What are you?" I remember when I was at Thales, they couldn't figure out, myself and my team and my management couldn't figure out, were we IT? And then we'd report into the IT structure. And it's like, no, you're engineering. And then a few months or a year later, we're reporting into the head of engineering, and then back engineer. Well, you're not quite engineering; you're now IT. So we did that flip flop of that until DevOps came in. The term was great, but how it was implemented and so how it became this Frankenstein of technologies, it pains me. And we still do it today. The amount of DevOps engineers I see on CVs. And it part of me dies inside every time I see it.
Yes, indeed, and it sounds like a sort of personal pain there, Jay. I can see it in your eyes, definitely.
Yeah, I'm gonna cry in a minute.
Yeah. we don't offer any tissues on the channel, unfortunately. There's no Cloud Therapist tissues, but yeah, I can sympathize with that. So David, I mean, Jay mentioned sort of some course corrections, then we'll mention a few more in a minute, but sort of platform engineering recently has come up as one. What's kind of, is this? I mean, I've seen it as a shift left approach, really. Is that sort of a fair thing to say?
I think it's a fair thing to say, and I think from my point of view, the platform and engineering approach is the right kind of approach. And just to kind of chip in on a few things that occurred to me when Jay was talking about the FinOps topic, if you don't mind.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about the agile component of the thing is the right sort of thinking. The cross-functional teams part of the thing is the right thinking. Having platforms so that it's simple for me to actually get coding and get stuff done. That's what it's all about. One of the best examples of getting it right is William Hill, the 80-year-old UK brand in the betting space.
Yeah.
And a guy called Finbar Joy was the CIO CTO when he made the transition from them, doing 18-month projects or 2-year projects to get a new product out of the door, and contracting that to 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And we create a product, we have a fail fast mentality, we create it, we try it, it works great. If it doesn't, we go on to the next one. And that his shift of the way his support and development team worked, was all about that going agile, adopting FinOps, having cross-functional teams, but not worrying about but actually focusing on the business objectives of getting new products out of the door, and the idea of platform engineering to simplify it so that I get stuff out of the door quicker is really what it should all be about.
Yeah, I mean, I had a similar story with Bet365 as well. I think there was a guy there who was, very much an advocate, and I heard him speak on a couple of occasions and some conferences, and it was, I think, more or less the same sort of approach for them. So yeah, so certainly, I think if you have that team and the drive and the knowledge, then you can make us successful. Doesn't matter what we call it, what we call ourselves, but the thing that you're doing, is more or less kind of in that sort of direction, and that can be successful.
It's all about a cultural change as well. To actually adopt that kind of approach and get it right. I mean,
absolutely.
Finbar even moved his team to Shoreditch to make it kind of trendy and cool, and and so we could hire better expertise who were attracted to Shoreditch.
That's when Shoreditch was the place, definitely. I'm not sure these days, but yeah, definitely was.
No, probably not these days.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Back a few years.
Yes. But yeah, I mean, absolutely, culture change is part of that, and I really do stress that. And in other videos, if you've kind of anybody's watched the channel or whatever, then I do stress that quite a lot in that. In fact, actually, in the one that I did with Tracy Bannon earlier this year, and I've just released the clips for that actually on the channel. So do check that out. I'll drop a link in the description of the video. And that one, I call it a DevOps, and that whole sort of agile thing is a stage 3 migration for me. And we talk about sort of cultural change definitely being more actually important than necessarily the technology itself. Okay, so definitely sort of platform engineering, internal developer platform, or portal as some people call it, is a kind of shift left. I've actually written an article on this, which should be now on the T-Systems website, my employer. So I'll drop a link in the description for that. I go through a lot of this kind of platform engineering, what it is, shift left. It's another shift left as far as I'm concerned, and so on. And by the way, for me, shift left always means that we forgot to do something properly, and now we're going to have to go back and do it. That's always my that's what it definition for me.
Just to chime in,
go ahead.
Because shift left is great, and I'm all for it. But I actually think I can't remember where I heard it, unfortunately, but it resonated. Is actually when we're shift down now. It's automated. We're done with the shift left. It's now let's shift down.
There's no more left to go.
Yeah.
We can't go further out west anymore. So yeah, but yeah, I mean, I think the last two you touched on, Jay, SRE, site reliability engineering. I mean, still sort of important in that cloud ops space. I don't know kind of how it fits in with it, but it's still there. DevSecOps, I think, was the last probably of those sort of major shift lefts for DevOps. And then you had, a couple of years ago, it was kind of GitOps. GitOps was the thing with CodeFresh and all those types of players sort of coming in. And I was I was at the where was I? Cloud Expo, I think, in London at the Excel. And they had like a DevOps sort of section, and somebody was doing a presentation on DevOps or whatever. And I asked them the question. I said, "So where does GitOps fit in, and how would you kind of use GitOps, with DevOps? Where does it fit into that sort of whole thing?" And the answer was, "If it works for your organization, then use it." so, so I thought, okay, yes, very helpful. Thank you. That makes a lot of sense. Okay, yeah. So those challenges, Jay, I think have you seen a lot of those come in as well? And how have you guys kind of, how have you seen kind of customers try to deal with those SRE, DevSecOps, GitOps, and so on?
I think again it goes back to what you said. These are all philosophies, and you gotta look at what do you want to do. So if I take SREs as the starting point there, right? Reliability engineering, and this is moving in. We talked about change and going faster and getting things through the pipeline. In that shift left mentality. But that comes you don't want to sacrifice all the testing and the reliability and so on. So this is where the error budgets and balancing the rate of change with the stability and governance and so on and that you get. And that's where SRE comes in, and it's quite good. You mentioned that, okay, when you're creating lots of change, but you're doing that quite with a bit of rigor. Well, that's the security side of things, because you can apply that same philosophy to security, and that's fine. We'll just add that in as part within. We'll sandwich that in DevOps and call it DevSecOps, and then now we've got DevSecFinOps, and now there's DevSecFin AI Ops. How many times do you want to just put things in between Dev and Ops? But it's more, how do you start interfacing with these things and go into GitOps, which is slightly different in terms of, okay, that's actually more down the software defined route, right? Can you do everything as code? That's the key thing. And then how much code can you do that just from the original code base, and then manage your complete operational infrastructure through code? That's what GitOps is. And that gives you, going back to the advantages of software defined, why everything should just be that. That's exactly what it is. It's software defining your infrastructure and the services, and even all up to your governance processes, right? So the security guardrails are codified. Your test frameworks are all codified. Your pen testing is codified, and it's codified in your code base. How you structure your code base, I'm not going to get into that, but as long as it's codified, it shouldn't really matter. And then you just build your operational infrastructure or your operational services off the back of that. So that's the way I see sort of all of these things. How you do it can vary. Do you are you more operationally focused, and you get your support teams to do this, or do you actually get your developers? And this goes back to that shift left mentality. If you can, does it make any difference, right? There is some nuances in there. Do you want your developers doing security, and how do you maintain that validation and the separation there? The wolves guarding the hen house kind of thing. So there is a little bit of nuance there that you do need to bake in to make sure that you are really secure, or you're not worried about your business, your critical business application falling over at 2 o'clock in the morning, and can it self-heal and all of that good stuff that SRE practices gives you. And I've seen a lot of companies do it differently, and that's the other part of it, is going back to what they said, what's right for your business. I understand where that comes from, because you need to figure out what's important to you and where do you fit in that sort of maturity matrix of how you deliver business services, and then build from there. And maybe not all of it applies. You maybe want to take parts of it.
Yeah, and I think DevOps sort of came in because, again, we had to shift left to that, because we realized that a lot of the code that we were using was not necessarily signed, or we didn't know what the supply chain was really for it, the whole supply chain for it. And then GitOps, I think, because it's kind of focuses as on Git as kind of being a single source of truth. I mean, I can see the need for that, but whether we need to adopt all these different sort of so-called GitOps tools, and how do they fit in with your sort of DevOps pipeline? Are they going to replace the DevOps pipeline? Are they kind of at the tail end of it when you're provisioning into that environment, or where do they go? So the Flux CD and all these other ones as well. And again, that for me would look would look like an addition, as you said, fitting in between that sort of dev and ops piece as well. So David,
just to add to that for quickly, is so a little bit of practical advice on this, and the way I've done it is think of, I mean, we say CI/CD and we sort of lump that as one term, but you need to think about what is your continuous integration, which is more your development process, and then your CD, your deployment, and so on. Remember, continuous development or continuous deployment and continuous delivery and so on. So there's arguments about what the D stands for. But first start thinking about these as separate entities, and then going back to sort of, does it make sense for your application or your business to merge the two into one holistic thing where GitOps would be good for you? Or do you there's advantages on keeping those separate, right? And there's that gives you scalability and so on. So one thing that I've used is think of these things as separate things, and then see where the interfaces are between CI and CD.
Okay, and briefly, David, where do you think this is all going to end up in this sort of DevOps space? What's your sort of take on it? What you're hearing?
Well, my concern, I mean, I think Jay's absolutely right in terms of actually we've got to make sure we've got all the ingredients covered. We've got the security designed in. We've got the SRE side. That everything is covered properly, but without making it too complex. And FinOps was mentioned in the middle there, and obviously one of the complications we've got as an industry is that there are an awful lot of companies who just aren't managing the economics of all this stuff properly. And I know you're heavily into that, Simon, in terms of what you do. So I want to see it all simplified, but I also recognise what Jay was saying which is that there isn't a one size fits all solution. There'll be circumstances where one way of doing it works better than another, and we should make sure that we're not too prescriptive about how we put this dev and all the other bits and ops thing together. Yeah,
indeed. Okay, so we did have a section on honorary mentions, but I think we're probably a little bit over the time. But there's lots more from Jay, so I'll include that in the description of the video. So do have a look at that. There's all sorts of stuff in there, like systems management, software licensing, programming languages, and so on. A lot of those are kind of either going out of fashion or dying out as others come in. So I think we'll do a closing. So thank you guys very much for your time, your insights, and fantastic conversation. That was really enjoyable. I appreciate all the input. So all the stuff that we've talked about, guys, will include links in the description of the video, and we'll add some details on David and Jay as well. Also, I'd like to hear from you guys, from your war stories about these technologies, and are they dead to you? Are you guys still using them? Have you encountered them when you've kind of been working sort of in your various roles and some of the various organizations? And what's your experience been like? That'd be really cool to hear about. So do feel free to drop some comments in the description or the comments of the video itself, and that will be interesting. And also any other ones that we may have missed out on, any other dead tech that you might think of as well. But that concludes hopefully this series. I don't think I'm planning to do any more unless some other technologies die off fairly soon. We may revisit it, but yeah, that's it for now. Thanks again to my guests. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye for now. Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel to support me. You may also want to check out some of the other videos on this channel. Bye for now.